Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tradeshift's third paradigm shift debate as we close out our fall program where we have had 3 weeks, 3 debates, and 3 perspectives on the economy, planet, and people. I'm Krista Kaler, and I'm part of your strategic engagements team here at Tradeshift. Hope you're having a very wonderful beginning or end to your day, depending on where you're joining us from around the globe. And if that's in the US, perhaps you're prepping that turkey for tomorrow. Today, we have an excellent lineup of panelists on a topic affecting all of us, as many of us head into, I guess, almost 9 months of this new normal of working. So we're asking, does work still work? How has the change in the traditional model of work impacted our organizations and people and our home lives? I'll introduce you to today's moderator in just a moment to kick us off. But before I do, just a little bit of housekeeping as always. First, if you missed either of our first 2 debates on the economy and the planet, you can always access the on-demand videos through either the event page or our website. Also, I want to invite you to pop any questions you have at any point into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen throughout the debate. We'll have a few minutes at the end to ask some questions to our panelists. And last and certainly not least, following the debate and Q&A, we will have our very own Chief Product Officer, Rafi Brez, join us and do final wrap up. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator, Ben Watton. He's the founding partner and COO of the Kiko Group, which is a global group of agencies that focus on driving audiences through consumer-led insights. Like many of you here today, Ben has firsthand experience of leading a team that has been forced virtually overnight, pun intended, to adopt entirely new ways of working. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christy, and welcome to everyone. Well, my brief here today was to host an informal dinner party. So I brought a cheap bottle of wine with me to leave at the end, and also come armed with some interesting facts to fill any awkward silences. But I'm not expecting any of those with the panel members that I'm joined with today, and I'm excited to introduce you to Bianca Goes. Bianca has the best job title of anyone on the panel today as Chief Storyteller for WePro, and with over 180,000 employees globally, she must certainly have quite a story to tell. We're then also joined by Naomi Barton, who is the principal of her HR practice at Savannah. And having looked at her bio today, if you're looking to empower your leadership team, then she's your go-to person. And finally, we're joined by Doug Folden. He is the VP of People, another fantastic job title, being Vice President for the People at Tradeshift. And Doug shares my belief that there's a huge amount of power to come from collaboration. And I'm looking forward to exploring that topic with him later, especially in the context of where we all are today. But first of all, I wanted to kick off with a thought-provoking quote I read in Forbes, which said, "Work is something we do, not somewhere we go." And Bianca, maybe you could kick us off by just seeing if that's something that you think is true.
I love it. I love it, Ben. I don't know if I can borrow that. And you know, as they say in open source design language, right, that copying is an act of love, with credit, of course. But I really like that because I think it really sort of reflects the way that I've approached work and my teams, you know, and I think that jobs are less a segregation of job descriptions and key performance indicators, and more about a mindset, more about you know, ownership of a certain aspect of the business or function, responsibility, which you can either love or hate, right? But I guess in the context of the conversation we're planning to have, and all our discussions in the background, I think I could possibly argue both in favor of as well as against this entire work from everywhere, work from anywhere situation. And I just think that, you know, in all the conversations I've been having, Ben, with my friends from the HR community, and I'm sure the rest of my panelists here will weigh in as well. I've been speaking to our customer CXOs, a lot of who are managing right now teams which are 3,500, 4,500, 5,000 people strong across the globe. The sense I got was that long before 2020, there was already this sort of questioning, and particularly in the the knowledge work organizations, that do we really need to congregate, co-work on site to be able to get work done? And I guess the pandemic really sort of gave us that that answer, that we don't necessarily need to be in the workspace, given the massive uptick that we've seen in personal technology adoption, in digital connectivity. I think it's fairly clear during this pandemic and now where we're living at right now that individuals, teams, entire organizations can be perfectly productive remotely wherever they are at. And I strongly feel that some of these changes that we're seeing right now, whether they are in technology adoption, processes, whether they are in behaviors or culture, I have a feeling that some of these changes might actually become long-term changes in society, which isn't such a bad thing, right? Considering where we're all seeing around the world today, right? So I think going back to your quote, I love that. And I could argue both in favor of and against it, but let me just pause there and see what everybody has to say. You are on mute.
There you go. First one of the day. I won't be the last, probably. Then Naomi, what do you think about that? Especially in your field where you're looking to attract talent to organizations, is a physical destination, a shrine for an institution, an important thing?
So it's interesting, actually, because I think if I look at the searches that I'm currently delivering, yes, we are more able to think a little bit more differently about where somebody is and what the reality is for them in terms of location. So I have a client here in London who, we can look at people across Europe currently. The reality, though, is that they are thinking that on the basis that longer term, they will probably need to travel. And need to be prepared to travel a bit more. And I think there is a bit of this early adoption of this is great, woohoo, the whole world is open. But the realities of that, I think in a year's time or in 2 years' time will be interesting to see if that's truly converted in that way. Fundamentally, the business leader is quite keen on having his HR person a little bit closer, really. And will that eventually lead to issues in terms of the relationship? It'll be interesting to see. I think there's also a thing to think about in terms of, I'm a knowledge worker. I already worked from home, every so often, probably once a week. Yes, I probably will change the balance of that. But actually there's a huge population, that really can't work from home. If you're a nurse, if you're in retail, if you're in, and how are those jobs going to be impacted? And actually, how does that change society and change our cities? So, I think probably all of us sit in roles that we are working from home. This is my nursery / home office. So, we're living and breathing that experience. But, as we know, the pandemic has been very, very different depending on your walk of life.
Yeah, and I think also the support infrastructures that exist around that, both from an organizational structure. I don't know if you've seen that, Doug. Did you have to implement new procedures, processes, support packages for people who are embarking on remote working for the first time?
Well, I think that's a challenge a lot of people are still working through, because we don't know what the future holds. I was reading just last week how there's several large companies in the technology space that are making short-term decisions, but they're holding off on the long-term decisions for another 6 to 12 months because they just don't know what's going to happen. And so I think there's some knee-jerk reactions to have all the answers today and to invest a certain way today. And we may get to the point in 4 to 6 months where today looks a lot different than it does then. And so making these decisions is difficult, and it's also risky because you're going to invest a lot of your capital that could be invested in the company in other ways. And so you've got to make sure you think through this in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, approaching a task, or just approaching the debate maybe with some of my internal colleagues, culture has always been at the heart of our growth strategy and hopefully becoming and staying a successful business. I was reading a Gartner study this morning that says 74% of businesses were looking to shift some employees to remote working permanently. Naomi, how do you keep staff connected and motivated and loyal if you can never ever get them together in one place physically?
I mean, there are plenty of examples where that's been happening already for many years in global organizations where people have built leadership teams and worked with leadership teams where they've never been able to be in the same place. Often, though, that's not their first choice. Often they would have chosen to spend time together in some kind of scenario on a social basis at the very least. And I think there's a number of things that are really, that are huge issues to grapple with in terms of culture and the impact of culture with that COVID-19 or working from home and virtual working will cause. And what COVID has brought to thinking about culture in the workplace is every single person's situation is different. Before we started this panel conversation, we were discussing where in the world we were and what restrictions we're living under. Now, if you add in the layers of, well, I'm a recent mother of a young baby, and we didn't have childcare, and all of these sorts of other layers of what I might face as a personal challenge that could be different to the next person's. So I think in terms of looking at culture, there are some big questions about what's important in culture. Are all the things that we used to do, are they truly contributing to culture? Why is it still important? And then thinking about how you personalize that experience. So again, individualization, personalization is not a new theme, but it's definitely something that I think as a leader, or as HR leaders and businesses need to be really thinking about in terms of how you drive leadership behaviors that allow individuals to work individually with their teams and support them in those difficult contexts, whatever those individuals are facing. Yeah. So I think that personalization and what that means is empathy, and developing empathic leadership styles and allowing these softer things in leadership to come through. So I mean, it's a huge question to talk about culture and how we do that, but small practical things, if I look at some different leaders in our business and that I'm aware of, making phone calls that have no purpose other than how are you today, what's going on in your world, taking the time to understand the whole individual, and I think that's really important, and that's not how large global institutions have really been set up to run. So I think this last year has really accelerated that piece in terms of actually empathic and authentic leadership. And I think that's really, really crucial to culture.
Yeah, really interesting. Bianca, I mean, that's an idea that we're seeing a development of new cultural codes in the workplace. Yeah. Is that something that you see?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's no right or wrong answer in terms of what is keeping people motivated and connected. One way is to have a common enemy, which helps. I'm sorry, I'm kidding. But let me give you an example. September, and I'm talking about a company which has 180,000 people spread across 59 countries, right? September, by then, the entire organization had spent roughly about 5-6 months working remotely, working extraordinarily hard, trying to work remotely, get used to this entire, situation, and rise up above all of their own challenges to, maintain customer business continuity, right? So all of that. And in the middle of that, we said, is there something that we can rally everybody behind? And with October being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we launched a global campaign targeting awareness and early screening, and how, during the pandemic, you shouldn't really stop all those planned mammograms, et cetera, et cetera. It was a month-long program, but it was an incredible opportunity to rally the entire organization around a common purpose that not just affects the 35% women that we have in our workforce, but men too. And that's something that people came back and said, we didn't know that men can have breast cancer. So the point I'm trying to make is that people align and follow purpose a lot more than they follow financial forecasts, right? So the purpose of the organization, the purpose around what a team, what an individual stands for is really crucial right now. So for leadership to go in and communicate their role, the role that each individual plays in the larger scheme of things, I think is one of the most crucial ways to keep people motivated in this situation. And just going back to a point that Naomi was making about leadership styles and behavior, I don't want to start a gender war here, but I think that both in business as well as in politics, I think leaders all around the world have kind of spent the last 8-9 odd months in a very real-time leadership test, right? And we've all had to learn how to lock down, how to unlock, while maintaining the balance between the health of our people, our economies, our businesses, right? And in the middle of all of that, a very small fraction of women leaders have sort of emerged as a benchmark for what competent leadership, looks like. So I think this is probably that time in history when we're going to let go of all these old archetypes of leadership and sort of adopt a more modern and a more balanced perception of leadership. And I think all of us really just have to embody that, really.
So Unilever, I was listening to a webinar earlier this week where we had Lena Nair, the CHRO of Unilever, and she was talking about they have the inner and the outer qualities of a leader, and up until now the outer is what we've really focused on, and actually what COVID has highlighted or perhaps accelerated is the fact that the inner is hard stuff, it's real stuff, having courage, compassion, empathy, that's those qualities are not, and purpose as opposed to ego. Those qualities are hard qualities now.
When you think about the the idea around culture you were mentioning, I think a lot of people confuse culture with social, and I certainly think there's a void in social, and people really miss that social, but that's not your culture. And I think when I think of culture, I try to figure out how do we align our culture with our strategy, and by that I mean how do we get people to make decisions, because it's the natural way we make decisions at our company that are naturally aligned with our strategy. And then you've got people that are executing on your strategy because they want to, not because they have to. And when you look at the research around motivation, obviously you need your basic needs met. You need to pay people fairly or have compensation, have a roof over your head, whatever those basic needs are. But otherwise it's intrinsic. It's that intrinsic motivation inside you. What's driving you to do this job? What do you believe in this? Why do you have a passion about it? And that's where you're going to be able to drive that collaboration and community around and within your own workforce, is having that common shared culture that drives your decisions, that's around your passions.
That's fascinating, and also the seamless segue into our next question. So thanks for that, Doug, because actually we've just had a new cohort of starters, all fresh into their first job, and it's one thing that's been really playing on my mind for a number of weeks. And Doug, I wonder if you've experienced anything similar, but what does it mean for a new generation of employees that are starting work for organizations, big or small, and are doing that from a virtual remote perspective from day one? This is the working world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I often tell people I learn a lot about management from parenting, and I have two boys that are both university age, and so I get to interact with a lot of people of this demographic, these young adults that are emerging into the workforce. And over the break, we had two of my oldest sons, good mates, friends, and we were talking about their internships. And they both had internships at the same company, in the same location, different teams, different projects, but the experiences were different. One was brought into the internship, and they were asked to work on a project. They were given pretty clear direction. Here's your project. Here's what we want to do. Here's the undeliverable. Any questions? Okay, if you have any, come reach out to me. And they had a lot of autonomy to go out and do that. And they were treated like an adult as an employee. And the second individual, same company, different team, his manager met with them and said, here's the project we have. Here's the outline. Here's the deliverables. Let me introduce you to Dave. Dave is a senior engineer. He's going to be the first person you talk to every day. He's going to be the last person you talk to every day. As you're going through your day, he's the person you can interact with. And if you need me as a resource, I'm expecting to talk to you every couple of days and reach out to me and talk to me. And just those slight differences in the approach, the experiences that these two individuals had in the internship was night and day. And to say that COVID or the pandemic or the work from home is going to limit our ability to help these young, emerging workforce be successful, I think is a little bit of a cop-out, but I think it's going to take a lot more work to be effective at it. And so if you don't have the right managers with the right level of skills to adapt to it and to engage in it in a different way, then I think it's going to be very difficult for them. And I think our issue is how do we prepare our managers for this transition? How do we prepare our managers to work with these? Because the interaction is definitely very valuable. You talk to Facebook and they say all their new hires are going to be in person, but other jobs could be remote. And so there is a lot of learning that goes on, and we need to figure out how do we do that without being able to be in a physical place with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Bianca, I mean, you must see this as well, real time.
Yeah, you know, my entire team is comprised of people between 23 and 29. And I think their mindset is very different. What strikes me as very different from, you know, when I started work is that millennials today, they're not really looking at the compensation package or how much money they're going to make as the primary reason why they're going to be in a company, stay on in a company, or join a company. What they're looking for is the ability to travel while still being employed. They're looking at what are the soft skills that they're going to learn, the people they're going to meet, the network they're going to build. And it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier, right, which is about culture. The youth today actually give a fair bit, set aside quite a lot about culture. And I think leaders today will be better placed, and they'll be serving their teams and their organizations better if they realize that about millennials. And I wonder how, to the point Doug made, right, about Facebook wanting to have new employees as you know, on site, but everybody else remote. I wonder if at all in the future it's going to be possible to have this all remote or majority remote workforce for the long term, where you're not really tethered to an office. I don't know if that's going to work, even though I'm leaning towards a work from home model simply because of the positive changes it's had in my life, and, you know, in what we've been able to achieve in the last 6-8 months while being at home, which is surprising.
Yeah, I think again, speaking about that cohort, that, you know, the next generation, you're talking about values over and above financial reward. You know, I was thinking about in a year where we've seen even the fashion icon magazine Vogue run a front cover for the activists around Black Lives Matter, and the ripples of Me Too being described as by Tarana Burke as just the start. You know, how, or do you think the pandemic will accelerate you know, the trends around equality and inclusion? Naomi, what's your view?
Oh, the pandemic's had a huge impact, and I think what it's done is shine a light on the fact that we are some way into looking at equality and inclusion, but there are still huge inequalities, and you know, we are nowhere near inclusion in the world. So, you know, if I think the impact on women, we know from all of the data that women are were adversely impacted in terms of job losses. So actually this recession has had a harder impact on women. We know that women have taken a higher burden. So first of all, they've taken a higher burden economically. They've also taken a higher burden in terms of the unpaid work at home. So, you know, lots of places closed schools. They've had to, they're typically taking having more hours dedicated to that unpaid work, and that will come through. You know, women, I know from the work that I do, it's much harder to engage women at the moment to get them to take a risk. And, you know, yes, this is a big new hard job and you're going to do amazing, but it's a really hard time to have that capacity for it. So I think there's a huge impact in gender diversity, and we risk losing a lot of the gains that we have made, and we haven't made enough. And then, not to mention, when we look at the data in terms of how COVID has impacted from an ethnicity point of view, and part of that is due to the social inequalities in our structures. So, you know, it shone a light. How we respond to this, though, you know, is critical. And certainly, you know, it's really interesting, as Bianca said early on, looking at the different countries and where, you know, some of the female leaders have been part of the decision, you know, have been at the leadership table making decisions about how the country responds to COVID. There's been a very different perspective in terms of how the pandemic has been handled. And I know, as a woman in my country, that I feel the lack of women in leadership and politics in terms of the decisions that have been made, and the blind spots about what happens if we, you know, don't allow this to happen, and that sort of thing. So, you know, there's so many, and that's just my own personal experience. So, you know, I think it certainly has shone a light. I think people are talking about this and aware that this has happened. The direction that we go in from here, well, that depends on action, I suppose.
Bianca, do you think the pandemic has put more barriers up, or do you think it's giving the opportunity to remove some of the barriers for diversity and equality? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute, Bianca.
Well, I went second. I think it's just really sad that the world needed a pandemic of this scale to realize that we're possibly all better off if everybody can participate in the economy. But I think in the last 8 months, we've possibly wiped out decades worth of progress made on equality for people from underrepresented communities. Some of the numbers that I've been reading, for example, in the US, I believe women represent roughly about 49% of the workforce. I may be off on that number by a tad bit, but they accounted for 59% of the job losses in the month of June. I mean, that's staggering, right? How do you start fixing a problem like this? And so that's where I think the corporate world needs to step in, because companies who have the power to make the change, they need to really stop talking about diversity now and get serious about diversity, because I think enough already about this whole business case, right? And I think I want to obviously bake in the other inequalities here, but I just want to focus on one thing which has been said a lot, and we've been debating that a lot, in my circles, which is that it's really tempting to think that work from anywhere, work from home has been a great equalizer for women. But in reality, that's not the case, because embedded assumptions about gender roles that actually mean that the domestic burden, whether it is childcare or schooling or elder care, whatever be the case, actually falls squarely on women. And permanent forward-looking solutions from corporate houses across the globe have been missing from the conversation. And I think that's something that really needs to happen. The people who are most at risk right now, people from indigenous communities, people from different ethnic backgrounds, people with non-binary identities, transgender people, they've been disproportionately affected. And I think it is everybody's responsibility, but really boils down to the choices and decisions we're making as an organization. I think we need to keep the edge in HR, which is humanity, right? I mean, there can be no substitute for human judgment when it comes to decision making, and no amount of AI algorithms and data-backed decision making should replace that human element and that human participation when making decisions about employee enablement processes during a pandemic and after.
And Naomi, if organizations are able to make that demonstrable, e.g. they can show their leadership in this field, is that something which then becomes a USP when they're looking to attract future talent?
So if you're talking about diversity, I think we know without a shadow of a doubt that having role models is critical. So, and it's not about figureheads. It's not about, it's not about hitting quotas or anything, but representation is key. If you're not in the table, part of the conversation, I can only live my own lived experience, and that's what I will bring to this forum. But that's why we need diverse points of view at the table. And so, representation is key. You need to be able to see yourself in and amongst that. And, that needs to happen in every walk of life. It needs to happen in search firms, for instance. It needs to happen, so it needs to happen in every walk of life for it to be, we need to be reflective of society. And I think this is what I mean about the data just showing that we're not there, that we have these massive social inequalities and a lot of work to do.
Great. Doug, any thoughts on this topic?
It's interesting. There's been a lot of conversations around gender, which I absolutely would subscribe to. One of the things that we learned also was just around economic differences, where for some people, the idea of not having to commute is great, or being able to work anywhere could be potentially great for people in lower income communities. But the idea of having to do that from home often becomes a inhibitor. If you have 2 or 3 people trying to do a job from home in a shared apartment, that's 100,000 or 1,000 square feet type of space. And so there's the idea that you have to there was a trend recently that, you know, when this first happened, everyone has to turn their video on, because we want to make sure everyone's present and we want to make sure we're interacting. But we quickly realized that that's very, it can be very disadvantageous for some people that don't live in a place where it's convenient to have a video on, and to judge them for not being able to do that is bias that we may not even realize that we have. So it's, once again, just being conscientious of different people's situations, whether it's a living situation with small children, whether it's, you know, a young adult working with 3 different roommates in a small apartment, or someone who's just financially not able to have a space that's dedicated to work. Those are all things that are biases that we have into the workplace that we've got to figure out during this pandemic. How do we make sure we don't make decisions when we're interviewing candidates, for example, or whatever it is, on some of these biases that could potentially disadvantage people for reasons that are not related to their qualifications for the job.
Yeah, thinking there about, you know, how technology has facilitated this, I think, you know, as part of a marketing services organization, I've been very used to, since the start of my career, to log my time in hours and minutes of every day, so that we can explain to our clients where we've spent their money. You know, very similar to lawyers and accountants. Unfortunately, that's about as close as our industries come in comparison. But, you know, a number of employees have been criticised recently during this period for using technology to monitor employees' productivity during the work hours. Bianca, do you think they're wrong to do that?
I'm not sure I'm qualified enough, or I have enough data points to talk about this, but I'll speak of it as an individual. I just think that fairness is ever so important right now, right? And I think that's achieved simply by doing right by people and doing right in the world. Goes back to what Naomi was saying earlier. It is about empathy. It is about trust, really. Yes, technology can help and it's aiding, but while we let technology sort of embrace technology, I think we also need to be aware that it has its limitations. It can be a very empowering tool, I'm sure, when it comes to identifying biases in the system, but it can never fully 100% tell us what processes are biased or what data set is biased. And so all I'm trying to say here is that while we adopt technology, we also shouldn't let the lack of perfection hold us back, but at the same time be aware that technology in itself can be biased and flawed. But there are new technology sources and new tech stacks which are available every single day, product developments which are constantly sort of evolving, that help us on this journey. And I'm sure others on the panel are more experienced to talk about that than me.
One technology came to mind that I was discussing with somebody earlier today, with a chief HR officer, and she was saying that there's this wonderful technology where you can find, you can sort of look at what people have been, what website, you can tell how engaged your workforce is based on what other websites what they're looking at during the day. Are they surfing on Amazon, or are they working, etc. And I saw the real value of that at an aggregated level, but I thought we had to be really careful, if that starts to look at an individual level. So I think it's all based on how it's used, what it's feeding into, and what value you're getting out of the data at an organizational level. Personally, at an individual level, I think you need to be really, really careful based on, breaking that trust.
Jump in here. I think the technology is certainly there, and the company certainly has the ability or the rights, because most people sign that away when they take a job. But if you're focused on that, I think you're looking at the wrong thing, because when you look, if you really are a true effective leader or manager, you should be in tune with what your team is doing. And like, for example, let's look like an SDR, a sales rep whose job is to make phone calls to generate sales leads. Some people might generate, they may measure them by 50 phone calls a day or 25, whatever it is. I don't care how many phone calls you make. I care whether you've generated $1 million in leads. And I don't need to monitor your phone to see if you've made enough phone calls or sent enough emails. What I care about is the outcome of what you've done, not the output. And so when I think about your role, have you delivered the patch that you need to deliver? Have you developed the software? And if you could do it in 8 hours, or if you could do it in 4 hours, more power to you. I mean, It's what is the result of the work, not measuring the tasks that don't really drive the business results that you're looking for. You want to know what's actually being achieved. And if you're looking at technology to see whether you're surfing Amazon or eBay or whatever it is, I think you're doing the wrong thing. You should invest in your managers to better manage your teams, to better measure the output of what they're doing and making sure that aligns with your business goals.
I think that comes back to, is work something that you do, or is it somewhere that you go?
Yeah.
Yeah. And continuing that technology trend, so moving, even to the, I guess, to the extreme, but automation. Automation has the opportunity to remove, human labor from the opportunity of work, or not even workplace. How do we manage that transition of people, and how do we look at displacing or increasing the number of new types of jobs and roles for those people displaced from automation? Naomi?
Back to me. I think this pandemic, if anything, has shown the real need, the fact that people are not on their way out, and they're not going to be replaced by robots and automation. And you can't teach a robot empathy and compassion and to lead people in that way. And people don't want to be led by robots, which is why we're not already further ahead with automation and AI. What I do think is that this is, people are feeling really at capacity. So, when I talk to people in business in all walks of life, people feel very busy, incredibly pushed and incredibly stretched. And so I think there will be more automation. I think there will be more AI, and that will allow for is more productivity and innovation, because it will take away manual aspects of people's jobs that they find frustrating and demotivating, frankly. And I think that's where the real opportunity is. They'll fill in gaps where my brain sometimes lets me down, my memory sometimes lets me down. They'll do things like that. They'll make us sharper and better. I don't think they'll replace us.
Bianca?
Yeah, I was going to start by saying that I wanted to take out that word remove. I wanted to remove the word removed from your question, because like Naomi said, human beings are not going to be replaced. I remember going back to 2017, January, we were at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I had a conversation with Kai-Fu Lee, who's a well-known expert in AI and automation and intelligent machines. And I remember a lot of people asking him, what happens in the scenario? What about singularity? And he's like, that's never going to happen, because we're pretty much like 20 years ahead of that. So just taking off of that, I think it's human beings will never be replaced, but it's more about a placement right now. So a placement of or replacement of the routine jobs, the manual jobs, which also means that all of us will just have to be, at the edge, always learning, always making sure we are relevant and picking up those digital skills, which is such a great message to leave for, the youth today and the junior people in the team that we have, that you have to constantly be curious about the world, about technology. It's a great time to be in technology, and pick up what you like, because you never know where it's going to head from here.
And if you look at the history of the world, I mean, there's always been technology replacing jobs. You go back to the Industrial Revolution, you look at cars and trains and planes, and everything's replaced something else. But it hasn't made the human impact of what we do disposable. There's going to be stuff that we're going to innovate into. There's going to create new jobs. And one of the big things in the States is the idea around clean energy, and all the new jobs are going to be created as a result of some of the dirty energies, maybe the coal mining or the other energy sources being phased out. But there's going to be new innovative technology jobs around solar, around wind, around ocean currents that are going to create new careers and new jobs that people are going to be able to jump into. And I think it's going to be an exciting period. I think we could be entering a new phase of innovation that technology is going to push us into.
I'm laughing because here in the UK, there's going to be a whole new career path in cyber for everyone. And if you're British, you'll understand the reference.
Oh, sorry.
I was just about to say, I saw some interesting information today talking about the unemployment figures. So this is unemployment, and it's a similar repeated pattern in the US as the UK. And this is the challenge for leaders today, is that yes, we've got this unemployment, but actually we've got a desperate need for other skill sets, and the unemployed skill sets don't currently match, and that's versus where the job opportunities are, and actually the gap in between has happened so quickly. So the big challenge is actually developing those capabilities and moving people into the data, cyberspace, clean energy, the technologies, and upskilling that workforce. And that's certainly a huge challenge, I'm sure, Doug, that you will face as a HR leader in supporting an organization with that.
Yeah, absolutely. If we don't have enough challenges already.
But it just means the talent, I hear people sort of saying, well, we've got these higher unemployment numbers, so surely, the talent, there's availability, there's a pool of people. Well, yes, but they don't have the skills that match the jobs necessarily. So I think that's, we've got a gap in that respect. There's still a real talent and capability shortage.
Yeah, and I think that then comes back to the culture of organizations to shift away from traditional interpretation of skills and experience and have slightly broader perspectives.
A lot of the big jobs didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. Jobs in social media. Who in this panel has a leader in social media, and that person has more than 5 years of experience. So it's changing, but it doesn't mean that jobs are going away. Go ahead, Ben.
No, I was actually just about to take a slightly different tangent as we come into the last 5 minutes of the discussion, just for a wider view, really. As I walked very naughtily into my office this morning through a deserted Regent Street in the lead up to Christmas, posed the question: do we think our city centres are going to take on a different role for workers? Will there be new models for what an office space is, or a remote working, shared working spaces, which give people, as you were talking about, Doug, people which maybe don't have home environments where they can work, but have destinations where they go and work from, just not necessarily a corporate environment.
I think
Bianca. Oh, sorry, Doug.
Yeah, there's going to be. You mentioned Regent Street. Every village in the UK has a high street, right? And instead of going to London city centre, you may be going to the local village you're in and visiting those establishments. And so there's going to be an opportunity for smaller businesses within the suburb communities to serve this workforce. And you don't have the large companies that are providing breakfast, lunch, and dinner for you in your office. And instead, you're going to see those people going out into the communities and patronizing the smaller restaurants and getting the takeout and the curry and chips, whatever it is, that normally wouldn't have the customers, because people are more dispersed. They can reach out to different areas. So it will have an impact, but I'm not sure it's a bad impact.
Bianca?
I'm not sure I can add any, say that in a better way, but we're seeing this right now, very real time, at least in India, because I haven't traveled out of India for 8 months now. There is a significant shift in migration of people away from the metropolitan cities. And in India, actually, you have 70% plus of the population living in the 4 metropolitan areas, with a subset in the tier 1 cities. And we're seeing a significant shift away from that because people are anticipating a longer blended work model, work from anywhere model. And that's definitely it's going to play out slightly later in the Indian economy. But I just have a feeling that in some ways, like Doug said, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because people are now getting the opportunity to be geographically flexible, right? They can actually live where they want to rather than having to live where they need to because of their job. And that also means that from a job perspective, a capability perspective, it's opening people up to roles and opportunities that based on merit, based on capability, as opposed to geographical placement. So that's again a net, I think.
I think this is already happening. This is already happening, hence the growth of the WeWorks and everything else. So it's accelerated. I think we come back to, most leaders probably at the time, by the point they're an executive leader in a business, they've got a nice house with plenty of space and a study and, a different experience to work from home. So, office spaces will absolutely exist. Places where people go to work and collaborate will definitely exist. Where they are will be interesting. I suspect that it's not the death of London by any stretch of the imagination, but more the growth of other places. So maybe the towns, the regional towns, things like that. I think we'll see that as we recover from this, that wealth is better spread rather than centered purely into one place.
Great.
And to that point Doug made about small businesses, one of the things I've noticed is that there is a big shift in the home improvement business. So flooring companies, plants and potted plants, and this entire gardening, green thumb situation, right? So there are businesses which are right now thriving because people are at home and they feel that, oh, we could do slightly better with that wall maybe. So it's an interesting shift, right? I don't remember ever having been at home more than 30 days without international travel. And here I am, 8 months at home, having grown a green thumb. I have 14, 17 potted plants in the house. And my family is like, what happened to you? So.
Yeah, and I think, wrapping up, I think all of the conversations we've had today, people have been welcoming. It's been a long time since you invited the boss round for dinner on a Friday night. Yet over the last 10 months, everyone's been inviting colleagues, senior leaders into their home, and I think that's the biggest demonstration of a cultural shift, that people have become comfortable and been able to operate in that way. So I'm getting a small nudge that we're going to move to a Q&A session now. So I think Christy's there to help coordinate.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'll just bring it back. This is a question actually to all four of you. Love to hear how you would best motivate your workforce with non-financial rewards during the pandemic.
I think recognition comes to mind. So, this is something I was thinking about this week. How do you recognize staff? Normally if you're in an office, you'd say, well done. Other people would hear it. You can still say well done, but other people, there's no echo, there's no sort of wider. So recognition's really important, telling people they've done a good job. And then I think the other thing perhaps comes to some of what Doug talked about in terms of developing, good management, and good learning opportunities. People still need to be stretched. Even if they're stretched at home, they're looking for challenge. They're looking to develop and work. Yes, they're getting the job done, but are they still growing in their work? And so I think those two things, it's really important not to lose sight of those while we get the job done from home.
And I think people want meaningful work. They want to do something where they feel like they're contributing to something bigger than themselves, and something that they have, once again, that intrinsic motivation to do something well. And people that get to that point where they're motivated for the sake of what they're doing because they believe in it, or because they have a passion around it, or because it's something that's important to them, there's a lot of power in that, and figuring out how to pull that out of people and help them realize that, I think, is a skill that that if we could do well, I think that solves a lot of the problem. Once again, you have to meet those basic needs. You have to make sure you're trying to pay fairly and make sure those basic needs are met. But if you can guide people towards understanding how to be intrinsically motivated, that's very, very powerful.
Excellent, thanks. We'll take one more. What advice would you give to someone just starting out in their career and trying to make an impression in a predominantly remote working environment? Actually, I'll turn that one to you, Ben.
I think many of the same things that you'd want people to do if they're entering a physical environment, but it's putting effort and thought and care into the job that they're taking on. So as broader research as possible, understanding your colleagues, who you're going to be working with, who you're going to be for, coming armed with great open questions, putting forward ideas to come together with either your peers or wider colleagues inside the organization. I think going back to Naomi's point, sometimes we've been encouraging people to pick up the phone for no reason. And we've been facilitating something called a buddy system. So we do a speed dating. So you try and give people the opportunity to step out of the day-to-day and step out of the back-to-back Zoom calls and just have a moment where they can talk about what they're going to do at the weekend, or who's got the next new puppy in the office, to bring down some of the barriers that working remotely does, and increase the relationships which ultimately drive our business.
Excellent. Bianca, maybe I'll let you take that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that another thing, Christy, that never gets turned down, and people actually pick up the phone and speak to you if you say that you're just curious about the business and you want to know about the business, you want to know about what they're doing and how they're adding value. Curiosity is irreplaceable. So if you're curious about the business and you reach out to somebody to say, hey, I'm new and I would just like to know how we do things, what we do well, where is our company bleeding? Because if I can't work where I don't really know the product or the business or the vision behind it. So if you reach out to people proactively to say that, I'd just like to understand, there's no outcome from our conversation beyond me taking away something that you already have, which is knowledge about the landscape, knowledge about the business. People always remember you for that. And that's essentially something that I encourage my teams to do all the time. I say, this is before COVID, I would say that I don't want to see you in office 5 days a week. I want to make sure that at least one day you're out there visiting another office, setting up a meeting with another team, just sit down with them, shadow them as much as it's possible, understand what they do. And people always appreciate that.
Absolutely. That's a really great point to end on with the curiosity piece as well. Great. So I guess I'll thank all of you for joining us. Thanks, Ben, Bianca, Naomi, and Doug. Very, very engaging discussion, particularly, when we think about the mindset needed, new cultural codes in the workplace. And what'll stick with me, a particular point Bianca made was, keeping the H in HR, humanity and fairness as a priority. So thanks again. And finally, just to take us home, I'm going to welcome our Chief Product Officer, Rafi Brez. He's going to help tie us all together as we wrap up. The stage is yours, Rafi.
Thank you very much, Christy. And I would like to thank all the panelists for today's debate. It was not a debate in the sense that that was not controversial. I think everyone agreed on the main points. And thank you again for sharing your thoughts and insight. I just have a couple of minutes and a couple of slides just to conclude, our third debate in this series. And I'm going to take you home from there. So I wanted to recap a bit, what we have been talking today, and from moving from supporting the current normal that was, at the beginning of the COVID-19, to activating the new normal and making sure that these become more structural into company policies. COVID-19 has led to unprecedented measures, first by governments, we talked about it, and now businesses, as they try to limit the spread of the virus. So in addition of restricting travel and canceling large events, a growing number of companies are now rethinking the way of working. And I think we talked about it today. While production workers, and we should think about them, as well as a system-relevant, workforce such as the medical and healthcare staff, are still working on site. But a majority of the remaining workforce has been encouraged or even sometimes mandated to work remotely from home, with the challenges that Bianca, Naomi, Ben, and Doug shared with us. COVID-19 definitely compels companies in mass to adopt, remote working. This seems at first sight, I would say, quite successful, but it has been, there are many signals that productivity and work-life balance are coming under pressure. And the only way companies will be successful is to start tackling remote working structurally as part of their company policies. This is the new normal. It's not really advised to take a wait-and-see approach because after the corona crisis, obviously remote working will become the new normal. And this is what I personally believe in. So moving to some perspective, there are some good news. And when I was doing some research, I found a couple of interesting quotes that the new normal of working from home is actually contributing to better productivity, maybe cost savings, and also contributing for a better environment. So you have two quotes that are, I know they are US centric, but I think that it's good to put some numbers and also understand that the fact that we don't have to commute as much as we did in the past is contributing for a sustainable environment. So I just put some quotes there, but in fact, when you go on the website, and we did put the link there, you will find way more metrics on how to promote and what are the savings. So this crisis is coming also with some good news. But as moving to the next and my closing visual here, as Bianca and Naomi actually mentioned, why technology can help. It is not solving all the challenges. However, I believe that technology, and this even before the crisis of COVID-19, can still alleviate the burden of working remotely. We talked about artificial intelligence and all sorts of technologies that they are not replacing human beings. It's about technology to facilitate making more convenient for workers to adapt to the new conditions. As Doug was saying, it's no longer about how much work you put into something, it's about the results and the outcome. So as workers are getting more focused, and I know there are some challenges when you share a small space, with a family, but sometimes 2 or 3 hours of focused work can replace 6 hours in an office where actually 50% of the time people are not sitting at their desk. Ben emphasized that it is important to keep this human dimension that we used to have in the office, in chit chats, asking about personal and family things. And I think we need to continue doing this, engaging and try to relate to personal life when we are into those Zoom and meetings, where we don't have this physical contact anymore. And this is what Tradeshift technology aims to do, is basically we want to ease collaboration, we want to connect business partners and communicate the right information in order to streamline end-to-end business processes as much complex as they can be, and remove also all the manual tasks or paper tasks and moving to paperless organizations. So this is the word of conclusion. Our products, applications, partners, I think they illustrate the future of work with our limitless possibilities. And I recommend, to organization companies to not be locked into a monolithic suite of traditional applications and choose a modern platform that will evolve with conditions and with you, and collaborating to create real outcomes. So again, thank you for listening and giving me, those 5 minutes of closing, and back to you, Christy.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Rafi, for closing us out. So now we've come to the end of this fall's Paradigm Shift program. As they say in showbiz, that's a wrap. Very, very a big pleasure having you all join us over the last few weeks. Please be on the lookout for future events from Tradeshift and visit our website for any upcoming sessions that you may see of interest. I wish you all a very wonderful day. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and please stay safe. Bye for now and take care.
Bye-bye.